I'm okay.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome back, Seb. It's always good to talk to you. I feel like it's fun. It's been fun to talk to you about transfers and in what has been a very eventful transfer window for a lot of clubs, Liverpool in particular, so far this summer. I think we were talking a little bit before we went live about how this is the transfer window. I think a lot of FIFA players have wanted for many years, football manager players for many years. Very exciting in so many ways, and here to obviously speak to you around the player who's rumored to be, well, not rumored to be, it seems is going to be imminently announced as the next through the door, and that's Hugo Ekitike from Frankfurt, who is coming in as a forward for Arne Slot Liverpool this season. So I've got loads of questions to still ask about the player because um, I'm happy to admit not to have seen too much of him apart from maybe some of his Europa League appearances last season, but have heard a lot about him. And I think on Anfield Index we did our own kind of like transfer committee podcast. Who would we sign? You know, had a look at all these the numbers and got some of the data guys to look at it from the sports science perspective. And it was his name came up, of course. And I think there's a lot of discussion around him in particular as a player, and I'd like to sort of maybe even do a true versus false kind of round with you. But
Sure.
let's start, I suppose, at the beginning, really around just your knowledge of how this deal came to pass in the first instance. Because of course, the first that we heard of it was that there was formal interest and a formal bid from Newcastle for the player, and that seemed to be the thing that kicked Liverpool into gear in terms of both announcing interest in Isak, but also the formal interest in Ekitike.
Yeah, so going back a little bit further, the conditions for Ekitike's sale have been pretty clear for a long time now. So quite a few Premier League clubs have inquired to Eintracht Frankfurt over the past, since the beginning of the year. And the fee has always been the fee. There was no financial pressure on Frankfurt to sell him, even less so when they ended up qualifying for the Champions League last season for next season. And it was clear they're always going to take a bid of somewhere approaching 100 million euros in some kind of structure, right? To have an offer accepted. And so, Liverpool had an interest for a long time. We've reported Chelsea's interest. We've reported Arsenal's interest. Manchester United, you mentioned Newcastle. Yeah, Newcastle offered just over 80 million euros for him. That bid remained a little bit quiet for a while. We wrote an account of the signing from Liverpool's perspective in the Athletic, and that should be out now. Initially, they kind of wanted to get the deal done quietly, without too much publicity, without too much media interest, and then just get it agreed and signed off. That didn't happen. And yes, as you said, it seemed to alert Liverpool. And listen, this wasn't Liverpool reacting to, oh, he's a good player, let's go and get him. Liverpool have tracked Hugo Ekitike. We report from his time at Reims, which should have been back in 2021, 2022, when he had his kind of breakout season in Liga. So this is a very, very long interest that actually predates Richard Hughes' time at the club, obviously. And yeah, but it was more of a kind of a hurry up, I think. And so that kind of kick-started the sequence of events.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of not entirely, I suppose, but the Luis Diaz signing. I remember when Spurs had kind of formal interest in the player, and that seemed to go, oh, this is a player who's been on our radar for a long time.
That sounds like an interesting player. Let's have a look at him on YouTube. Let's sign it. That's always the fans' perspective, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
but I think it's more that, oh, hang on, this player that we were actually thinking of targeting next summer is being targeted now. Maybe we should step up. And it seemed kind of similar, but I think obviously this position of who Liverpool were going to target for forward to come in, given I think the expectation that Darwin Nunez would move on, and I'm still, if this rumored Napoli move comes to pass, I will be watching. I'll be watching a lot of those games because
it's me too. But it's worth saying also, like, throughout this process, that Ekitike has always been Liverpool's number one target, as far as we know.
Interesting. Okay.
And that, yes, there was an expression of interest in Alexander Isak.
Mm-hmm.
No bid, just the kind of an expression of a willingness to potentially offer something. The semantics, but kind of important.
Yeah,
So it's always been a kind of, this is the right player for us. And obviously you mentioned Darwin there. Well, Darwin, hasn't really been a great fit tactically. I think he's an interesting player. I think he can be a success somewhere. I think I've
absolutely.
spoken about him enough that I think we agree on that. I just don't think it's here. And obviously, Luis Diaz was used as a false nine a couple of times.
Hmm.
The late Diogo Jota, that's a terrible thing that, but was restricted by injury last season, of course. And so there's been this absence of a number 9, and he's the one that they've landed on. And the data-led signing, it's someone they see as being the kind of the perfect combination of really, really talented, under 24, but with quite a lot of experience, because Ekitike has already played in Liga, in the Bundesliga, in the Europa League, and the Champions League. Hasn't played internationally for France yet, but inevitably will do. And so you have a guy that's almost a sort of perfect composition of attributes, and sort of it's satisfy the conditions whereby you would pay a lot of money for someone that, also worth saying, Harry, and this is something Liverpool think and something that Eintracht Frankfurt definitely think, he's still developing. Eintracht Frankfurt think there is ordinarily their preference is to sell players when they reach the limit of their development in the Bundesliga. That's what they did with Omar Mamouche. They thought, you can't grow and appreciate any more in German football. You need to go now. That's not what happened with Ekitike. He just, he could become many more times what he already is. There's a lot of potential still there. And I guess that's also another reason why people are comfortable paying what they are. But this is the guy, in inverted commas, that they want.
Interesting, because I was gonna come on to talk about that, because I think obviously, definitely with the online kind of way in which transfers are received these days, and Liverpool being as active and actually as aggressive as they have been this window, and as you mentioned, I mean, it doesn't get any less surreal or any less upsetting when we sort of like to talk about sort of the passing of Diogo Jota as well.
Horrible story. Yeah.
The Liverpool, like, we knew Liverpool were going to be doing business in this area regardless, even before those like kind of tragic circumstances. So interesting to hear that he was viewed as the guy, because I think there's been a lot of online discussion around actually painting Isak as the guy, and I think it's been people's view. I think more around just where the players are at in their development. I think you mentioned it there, right? And that Ekitike still has a lot of room to grow, whereas Isak may be starting to come into the player he's going to be, and sort of realizing that sort of potential as a really effective goal scorer, which I think always had the ability to do so, but I think he's really sort of becoming more of a focal number 9 now. So interesting
And not
to
for sale, Harry. Like
and not for sale.
just not for sale. Like I mean, that's what we understand at the moment. Definitively not for sale. So, obviously, everybody can have a wish list in football, but then shopping from an aspirant Premier League club, extremely well funded, of course, like Newcastle, versus a club who are set up to sell, who designed to accelerate players and deliver them to the very top of the game, which is how Eintracht Frankfurt would describe themselves. It's different. And so I suppose when you're talking about the guy, you're not necessarily saying this is the one player that we want in the whole of football. It's a realistically
The profile, yes.
profile that we can find, and it was Ekitike.
Yeah, because I think what was intriguing about sort of where Isak came into it was, of course, sort of that timeline I was talking about, where it seemed that Liverpool, on the same day, more or less, had expressed, as you mentioned, okay, of course, like many people, have been interested in sort of like signing Alexander Isak if he's available. Here's a rough figure, to sort of let you know how much money we might have to spend on him. We understand he's not for sale, but we just thought we'd just get in touch,
Test the water. Yeah.
test the water. But literally, it seemed like hours later, sort of the announcement that Liverpool were also then going to step up their interest in Ekitike, just whilst Newcastle had that first bid rejected. So it seemed as though it was going to be one or the other. But as you mentioned, one wasn't available at all. One was not for sale. So Liverpool pursued and went for Ekitike. Newcastle, I think, have moved on to maybe Yaron Wissa is the target they're looking at now. But I think we'll move on from Isak, because I don't want to get drawn into that, because I think there'll be lots of rumor around him and his availability for the rest of the window. But I'm more interested in talking about Hugo Ekitike himself. Um, a little bit on that perception point, as you mentioned. So I think when we did some work internally and sort of playing transfer committees, like laptop nerds in air-conditioned rooms, as I think one Daily Mail piece once called Liverpool's transfer setup.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, the air-conditioned rooms, lovely.
How dare you? How dare you work in comfort like that?
I know exactly. So I always like to bring it up, but where we landed on Ekitike actually was, and again, you're playing fantasy football when you're doing it for podcast, was that, and these are people whose opinion I do respect as well, was that I was thinking, is he too raw? Is he too much of a project for the fees that are being touted? And I think that was very much in the context of what had happened and with Nunez, really, where a player who was kind of viewed as a project, despite being obviously performing very well in Portugal, and then that not really coming to fruition and not being able to sort of fulfill that potential here. I do completely agree with you. I think he will go somewhere else and completely smash it. And Napoli is incredibly exciting for me because I think if that were to come off, he could become like a cult hero at that club, given his sort of personality and who he is as a player. But I think when we were looking at purely from a fantasy football perspective, as you mentioned, who's the more reliable goal scorer, perhaps? But then this player is lots of potential, could grow into it. But then the other point that came up really was to sort of counteract that was when we spoke about the Fleury and Wirtz deal. We spoke about how there was not really a bad angle to it. Like it made sense from all these different perspectives. And the one that kind of was, an amber light for Isak, despite the very obvious red light of him not being available, was his availability. And some of these discussions around his injury record and things like that, not something that has been a concern for Ekitike. Very present in the Bundesliga last season. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that perception of the player because lots of lazy kind of things I've seen being bandied about they're paying all this money, he scored this many goals, he's not a great finisher, another project, all the stuff that you do tend to see get trotted out, being quite reductive about the player. But tell us a little bit about what kind of forward Ekitike has become, because obviously we know about his time at PSG, maybe the lack of opportunity, and how he's grown in stature at Frankfurt.
Great question. He's a spectacle, Harry.
He's a spectacle, okay?
He's a spectacle. There's so many things that he does really, really well. And he's one of those players who, if you're sitting in front of a TV on a Saturday, in Germany, all the games are made available. You have the right to kind of switch between all of them. There's a conference channel. And given the choice between watching Hugo Ekitike and not, I always want to watch him because during last season, he had a kind of few flourishes in his first 6 months when he joined on loan, and a loan that became a permanent deal pretty quickly after he joined in January 24. But he was in this state where he was doing something new almost every game, and he was showing you something different. Not showing you that he was the finished article, but showing you this great combination of technique, speed, instinct, goal scoring ability, right foot, head, occasionally left foot, also creativity. So this is not just a player who is going to play as an orthodox number 9. It's not just someone who can exist in the channels and run defenders one-on-one and menace them that way. He has got a wonderful vision to his football. He's got a lovely touch. He's got a great sense of what his teammates are doing around him and where the weaknesses in a defense are. And crucially, he's able to process those 2 points of information very, very quickly. And I think there was a game right at the beginning of last season against Hoffenheim when Frankfurt played at home, beat them 3-1, I think. He scored the first goal, which is very him. He also created the second for Hugo Larsson with this incredible one-touch, cushioned slide rule pass. And I think that's what's going to surprise people, because I've seen the compilations on Twitter too, and I've seen there's that new thing where people go, oh, this is his last 40 shots.
Oh, I hate it.
It's I understand, but then, this is, first of all, the price is the price because that's what you pay for developing talent now. If you go shopping for a 23-year-old soon-to-be French international who shows that much talent, that's what it's going to cost you. But also, I I think in that situation, you have to imagine what the player can become and what you're buying over the long term. And, if all of his attributes develop at a kind of smooth rate, goodness me, what a footballer. Um, there are issues. I think a couple of them are really obvious. And, I don't think there's any hiding from this. Frankfurt are a transition team and they very, very rarely face low blocks, maybe against some of the very weakest teams in the Bundesliga occasionally, but the Bundesliga doesn't really work like that. It's not, how in the Premier League, the money teams, you so often end up watching what looks like the same game with like 10 men behind the ball, pack the box, that kind of stuff. For your Liverpools, your Manchester Cities, those teams, right? Ekitike hasn't had a lot of exposure to that kind of football. Might have had a bit of Paris Saint-Germain. I don't pretend to have watched very many of his few and far between minutes there, but he has a few difficulties. So if you want to have the sort of the lazy analysis, look at the difference between his performance in the 2 Europa League games against Tottenham last season. So the first one in which he scores that brilliant counter-attacking goal where he just the turnover, he's
drilled
right
it.
up to, oh goodness me, what a finish, what a goal. And that is Hugo Ekitike. That's what he is. But in the second leg, where Tottenham played very deep, very direct, just said, right, we're not going to play at all. We're just going to ask you to break us down, and then we're going to score with a penalty, and that's it. Really had a difficult time, and that's going to be his education, right? And I would urge any Liverpool fan to remember that, is that you have to allow him the opportunity to not just feel his way into that situation, but to apply his talents in a way that suits it too. And also to a lot of new teammates. Like I don't pretend to know what Liverpool's starting 11 is going to be on the first day of next season, but listen, Wirtz is going to be a big part of it. Jeremy Frimpong is going to be a big part of it. I don't know what else is going to happen between now and the end of the window, but there are going to be changes. And so all of these things together, they're little caveats. They're temporary things that you have to remember, and they're the context in which his initial performances are going to occur. And some patience is going to be required, but then that's the way of it, right? Like you're buying. I can't think of many better ways to spend that kind of money in the market if what you want is a forward. And also, you're not just buying number 9, you're buying a guy who can do a lot of different things as a number 9. He's not just a goal scorer. Like I like Darwin Nunez. I think he's quite a good player, but there's in terms of the breadth of abilities, no comparison at all. And actually, one of the surprising thing is when you look at Ekitike, when you stand next to him in like a mix zone, he's quite a slender guy. Actually pretty good in the air. Not in the kind of, he's not like Lee Chapman playing for Leeds in 1991 or whatever. He's not that guy. But he times his jumping really well. He gets in between defenders. He's able to kind of maneuver centre-backs to create sort of angles for himself. He's quite smart with that. And I think there's loads of things to like. And I have full faith in him. I hope people give him time to adapt to his new environment and to deal with the fact that he's a very expensive player now. But he can be a star, no doubt.
Yeah, when I saw those YouTube compilations, because that's where you go when you're kind of trying to sort of look to understand more of a player, especially when I hadn't seen much of. Yes, I saw some of the finishing. People just adamant to sort of highlight that, but I think the things that stood out to me. Almost similar to what you told me about Wirtz, really, is that like very fun player to watch, as you mentioned, sort of gliding about all over the place. Technique was there, creativity, a lot. Nice to see a striker's highlight reel that is not just him scoring, but actually him creating chances for others. Was not lost on me that there was another striker, another forward that Liverpool purchased from the Bundesliga who had a lot of those highlights in his highlight reel as well, in Roberto Firmino. And I think the other thing that I saw in particular was just it's hard to sort of read from a YouTube highlight reel, certainly. And I think whenever this comes up, you want to be careful about not accusing a player of being dumb or anything like that, because I'm not suggesting Darwin Nunez is dumb. But I think that it seems to me that actually there was a more that I would not be surprised at all if Hugo Ekitike takes tactical instruction better from Arne Slot than Darwin Nunez necessarily has over the last couple of seasons. I think Nunez has done a lot to try and change his game, but I think that it just seemed to me that this is the sort of player who will just deal with that kind of instruction probably in a bit of a better way. Whereas Nunez is a player who is always going to be a bit more of an instinctual type of player that is ferocious in transition, but perhaps is not got the other elements to his game that you mentioned there, the creativity, the awareness of teammates, etc.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a. I mean, I don't know enough about Darwin. I mean, I watched him on
Hmm.
TV, but I've never interviewed him. I know nothing. But what I will say about Ekitike is that sort of last season, obviously, is where his breakout moment, and the first half of it occurred in concert with Omar Marmoush,
Yeah.
Hugo Ma, as the German media originally called them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they developed
Okay.
their own. Yeah, because the Germans love a compound, right? Don't they? So
Hugo
Hugo
Ma.
Omar, Hugo Ma. Um, and I think what impressed me there was um, if you dig deep into quite a lot of Marmoush's work, there's some wonderful individual moments, but it's interesting how many Ekitike is at the root of. But
Yeah.
then, put it another way, Marmoush leaves in January, and then Ekitike is asked to not just change his role, but become the kind of the feature piece of the Eintracht attack at a time where there was a bit of pressure. They were going through the Europa League. He scored a brilliant goal against Ajax, if you can find that. That was, I think that was at the Waldstadion. Um, but then they're trying to qualify for the Champions League, and sort of a lot of that responsibility fell on his shoulders. And his goal tally was not what Marmoush's was, but then Marmoush is in his mid-20s. And Marmoush has had a lot more experience and knew the Bundesliga better and had much more exposure. But Ekitike was still able to be excellent, despite what for a lot of
Mm.
players would be, a really destabilizing development to sell your best player in the middle of the season. that's that's a nightmare for any club, surely. And any, it's for any kind of forward combination that's got to be highly disruptive. But he dealt with it very, very well and was playing. He wasn't prolific in the same way that Marmoush was, and But again, listen, if you compare where Ekitike was last season with where someone like Isak was at a similar age when he was at Real Sociedad,
Mm.
Ekitike comes out on top, and that wouldn't surprise me. I don't think many people, when Isak was 22, 23, imagine him growing into the player that he is today become. I think the potential was there, but with Ekitike, you can absolutely see it. And yeah, there's a lot to like about his adaptability, and he's been very, very well coached by Dino Topmøller, of course. He has shown a lot of maturity in the fact that it did not go well for him in Paris. He was in that. Do you remember the notorious bomb squad that actually I think briefly included Kylian Mbappé for a while under Luis Enrique when he wanted to leave the club? Ekitike was in that, and he kind of spent a year there on loan for Reims with the obligation that PSG had to sign him permanently. Did so for 35 million, and then between the end of his first season and leaving the club 6 months later, I think he played one more game. So he was properly bombed out, and then came to Frankfurt, worked really hard, impressed everybody. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about his application, his training attitudes, anything like that, and has reminded everyone of just what a good player he is. And I think when a player, Harry, when a player, it's interesting. When a player is seen as this great young thing when he's young and it doesn't quite go well, it's interesting how often they never come back from that. Like you can think of some examples, like Martin Odegaard is probably one, but Ekitike was definitely another who was like, this is a great guy, he's going to be brilliant, it's going to be better than Mbappe. And then people kind of lose interest as they sort of drop off the face of the map. But here he is.
Yeah, it's. And I was thinking I was thinking of that when I was looking at his record and sort of how he arrived at this stage, and it's not directly comparable, but kind of similar in some ways. And if you think of the way in which Ryan Gravenberch, when he was coming through at Ajax, very, very highly rated at a very young age, playing in the senior team very early, goes to Bayern Munich. I guess I mean, there's no bomb squad, but gets bombed out, doesn't play, comes to Liverpool, takes a bit of time to find his feet. No one really doubts the application. And
That's
then
a new
obviously
position,
that's a new position. Yeah, exactly. Liverpool try quite publicly to try to sign a player for that position. They don't get him, and then they go, "Come on, then Ryan, you're gonna do
Got
this."
it. Yeah,
and he did it. So I think it wasn't lost on me that I'm always impressed when I see players come back from those kind of sort of setbacks. And you mentioned Marmoush, like with Marmoush, post Marmoush, I was looking at some of those stats around. I think it was a goal or assist every 93 minutes in the
ridiculous.
Bundesliga with Marmoush, 136 minutes playing on his own after that. The only thing I thought of when I saw that stat was, oh, we can help with that, and just like post a Florian Wirtz gif or something, right? Because the amount of creativity that he is going to be provided with by the likes of Salah, the likes of Wirtz, the likes of Kirkes, whoever you might think of, right, is going to be tremendous. That's notwithstanding what he can do for others in terms of attracting attention for Mo, for Diaz or whoever may be on the left wing for Gakpo. So for me, I wasn't really that wasn't a downside when I saw those stats. I just thought, well, there's a very obvious solve to that, and he's going to be joining a team where there's a lot of star power in the team already.
Yeah,
The reliance is not going. Yes, there's the fee, but I don't anticipate, especially how Liverpool is as a club and as a fan base, that people are going to be upset if he doesn't sort of hit the ground running immediately. But there's a lot of ingredients there to help him do so.
absolutely. And there's also, regarding the statistics in the second half last season, well, Eintracht lost Mario Götze for a couple of months towards the end of it, who even at the kind of what
Yep.
we'll call the sort of the veteran stage of his career, he was still one of their most important playmakers. So you were really talking about an Eintracht Frankfurt attack that was based around wingers and runners rather than actual schemers, which is difficult, particularly over the course of such an exacting season. But yeah, and also like you mentioned, right, you go to Liverpool where it's kind of okay if you drop out of the starting lineup for one or two games. I mean, having to depend upon Mohamed Salah doesn't seem too bad, right, does it? You should be
Yeah.
fine. You should be all right, right? Or Cody Jakpo,
Yeah.
or that's like I'm sure he'll be all right.
Exactly, and it's not even having to depend on Mo Salah. I mean, Mo Salah, I think, given everything we know about his character, he still wants plenty of the shine. I think, plenty of the
He
attention.
can
So,
still play a little bit as well. He's all right still.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
He'd
think
make it
not
into most teams, I reckon.
knowing him, I think he's probably pretty keen on, emphasizing just how he's still the top guy in that changing room. So it's going to be fun to see how he gels with these players. If it helps him not have to run as much, I think he'll probably enjoy that. One comparison I saw, and I don't know if it's just a simplistic one because you think French striker, not necessarily always an out and out goal scorer, was the comparison to Karim Benzema in sort of how Benzema was very often the facilitator at Real Madrid for Ronaldo, for others, and then when those players left and the reliance was back on him to become the out and out goal scorer, he did so. And I think that there must be some interview somewhere or something like that because there was so much chatter on it that maybe this is like any young French striker, a forward that Ekitike had looked up to or sort of modelled his game on a little bit. Is there much truth to that based on your knowledge, or is it
I
just
don't
an
know.
obvious?
I don't know, but I don't know whether he looked up to him, but I like the comparison. Like Benzema's wonderful footballer, still is, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
in that sense that he didn't necessarily have to be the feature player in a high profile forward system. Like I quite like that. I think he can, and also like when you said Benzema, my brain kind of went to the sort of the highlight reel of all of his best moments. So I was trying to kind of insert Ekitike into some of them, and I can kind of imagine it. I can imagine him.
Mm.
Him doing that Penanka against Manchester City in the Champions League, or that header against Chelsea. I can see all of that. So yeah, I mean, it's not a bad one. I mean, I think the kind of, for a long time, the danger with French forwards was always new Thierry Henry, and
Wow.
no, no, no,
Mm.
no, and I don't agree with that. It's too, it's too simplistic. But like, yeah, Benzema, sure, I can see that. But then I think it's also equally important to say that he's something new, he's something different, and also he's a player of no fixed shape, because we said right at the beginning, right, if all of his attributes continue to evolve at the right rhythm, well, that never actually happens. Development is never linear in that sense. So there's going to be things, like a plant grows towards the sun, right? It's going to be quite a similar situation. What attributes are Liverpool going to get the most out of? What's going to become the most prominent? don't know, and that's kind of what's exciting about it. Very much his own player. So we'll see. We'll see what kind of shape he takes on.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think still, I'm seeing lots of discussion around exactly where Florian Wirtz will play for Liverpool. I know when I spoke to you, you were pretty adamant that look, he's going to be central. Like he's going to be central. He might drift to the left or whatever, but he's not going to be stuck out on the left wing. And there's still people I speak to who are adamant he's on the left. I think, but the limited 30 minutes I've seen of Florian Wirtz in a Liverpool shirt. Which was very fun, by the way, I have to say, even against like, Stoke in a behind closed doors
Play, right? He can play a little
game.
bit.
And just the simple stuff, like you mentioned, right? I think there was an assist he had for Rio Mungoboa, I think it was, and young player Liverpool have, and just like received the ball, passed it back to Jones, received the ball again, passed it. It made it look incredibly easy. Like these are the passes that I need to be making. Um, but yeah, I say that just to basically get to the point that Ekitike, I wouldn't be surprised to see him deployed in kind of different areas as well across that front. Well, maybe on the left is, but there's a lot of numbers there. The other point I wanted to ask around him is we spoke about this when we spoke about Wirtz, we spoke about Frimpong, that Liverpool do their homework when it comes to sort of like players' characters, like off the pitch, kind of how they do gel in the team, etc. Seems to be a lot of work that goes into that. I just wondered what you knew at all of the off the pitch kind of like Ekitike or like his character. He seems to me to have a healthy level of footballing arrogance, which I kind of want from my number
Sure.
nine. Yeah,
Sure.
but I just wondered what kind of persona or what's known about him. I remember you said when we spoke about Wirtz that you know nothing about Wirtz. Like it is sort of like personally, and that's how he likes it. I just wonder what's the case with Hugo.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of players' character, I never like to
Yeah, I'm not.
say anything until I've interviewed them, which I've never have done. But what I will say is, obviously, I know Eintracht Frankfurt pretty well, and have been speaking to them about Hugo for a long time, and I've never heard anything negative about his character. Also, even when it became obvious that he wanted to join Liverpool, which is kind of the reason why Newcastle's interest subsided. That's what he wanted. He was never a problem. There was never any sort of militancy to his stance. It was just a kind of this is my preference. The club were very respectful of that. He was respectful of the club. He was named in a friendly last Saturday afternoon against FSV Frankfurt. He was never meant to play. He was there to say goodbye to the fans and stuff. And he was very popular. They were, wished him well. And I think that's all kind of reflective of a player that,
Mm.
everyone admires. And I don't know. I mean, in terms of, what he likes to do with his spare time, what his favorite color is, don't know. But like, ordinarily, if there are red flags, you tend to hear about them. And I've never heard anything like that about him.
No, and none of that came up when I sort of was reading around the player anyway. But I also he has that component to him, or seems to have it anyway, where his fashion choices are going to annoy all the kind of all the right kind of older fans as well. When he turns up with one of these like tiny like beautiful Dior like man bags, whatever it is, or some kind of sunglasses,
Harry,
I'm already
if I'm on those
excited about
wages,
it.
I can't tell you how flamboyant I'm going to be. But I'm having the hair transplant in Turkey. I'm wearing the Dior everything. I'm spending thousand pounds on my currency. It's going to annoy everybody. So, like, nothing they do would be worse than how I would behave, right? So,
No,
enjoy it. Like,
I'm
like
very happy with it.
young guy reaping the rewards for his talent. Good for him. Do your worst, And
I'm very happy with it. Yeah, I say like Liverpool already have their kind of like I guess most clubs now have an kind of NBA style way whenever they arrive anywhere. It's like, oh, yeah, like what what designer are they wearing? And there are some of the more eccentric characters in the squad, I'm sure. Yeah, it seems like Hugo's going to probably join Ibu and a couple others in pushing the boundaries, much to my delight. But it's kind of what you want from your striker anyway. But
it's you need 100%. Like it's that confidence, right? That self-belief, that kind of ability to hold yourself in a certain way, particularly when you're worth the kind of money that you are. And so, I'm sure you'll have seen this. There's the video of him setting off from the airport this morning. We're recording this on Tuesday.
Mm.
to do his medical, and he's got a bit of a strut and in a healthy kind of. He just looks really happy with life, and I want that.
Yeah.
I don't want my forward being like, oh God, I'm worth all this money now, and oh no, and I'm not really any good. I don't want that, you know.
No,
So
and I kind of thought I felt the same way about Darwin Nunez when he first signed as well. So you could kind of tell um, that this was somebody who reveled in being the guy and wanted to be the guy. All right? And you can see that from Ekitike. I mean, also executes very good knee slides from what I can see as well, which is always like it's not going to come up in the stats profiles or some of the charts you may have seen uh, overlaid about sort of his XG. How does he convert? Knee slides doesn't appear there, but it's important. I say it's important. I don't want him doing any kind of triple backflips, but yeah,
not sure
it's
he can
important.
do. That is my one proper football manism, is that like I think this is based on my own lack of athletic ability. But anytime I see a player celebrate like that, I think, oh God, his knee joint, like or when they do the kind of the Loa Loa tumble. Do you remember that? Backflips, brilliant
Yeah,
celebration. But you think like, God, if you jar a knee or you time, and then you're done for 6 weeks or something. Like I can't. So that wear whatever extravagant clothing you want, but just be
yeah,
careful. Make sure you spend
yeah.
time in the kind of the ice bath afterwards if you're going to do that celebration.
No, of course. I suppose just as we get towards the end here, interested what I mean. We yet to see how Liverpool will line up. We yet to see who else might join the squad or might leave the squad. Um, but it seems to me, as we were talking about it earlier on, that if you were to slot Hugo Ekitike into the sort of number nine position, think about Cody Gakpo, Luis Diaz, Mo Salah, Florian Wirtz, Szoboszlai, but he fits quite well naturally without having to do too much, right? I think.
Yeah.
Um, any thoughts on how he might how he might be? I say be deployed behind a slot, but it seems pretty straightforward how he's going to be deployed. But yeah, perhaps you can.
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me just caveat it by saying that I'm by no means an expert on Arne Slot's Liverpool. They're just a team that plays football on television for me.
Yeah,
I live out here in Germany, but to me, he is. If you had a sliding scale of forward abilities and suitabilities that on one side had Darwin Nunez, on the other Roberto Firmino, I think I'd place him slightly or much more towards the Firmino end of that scale.
yeah,
I'm not passing judgment on those two players. I just mean like in terms of style. And so I think he'll be a number nine, but I think he'll be a number nine around whom a lot has to happen. Because, well, not a lot has to happen, but a lot should happen to really to maximize that sort of facilitating side of his game, because I think you could get all sorts of quality and all sorts of contribution out of him if he wasn't just a forward. He is not just a goal scorer. That to see him that way is a mistake, and I'm sure Liverpool don't.
what?
If they did, they wouldn't be paying what they are for him. But just a lot of activity. I imagine his. I can picture his relationship with Wirtz. One of the things that Wirtz likes to do with the ball is approach the box, 1-2s, pass into the box, and the movement back. With taking a pass back off a forward, working with that into space. I can imagine him being that sort of rebound board for someone like Wirtz. And clearly players like Luis Diaz, Mohamed Salah, of course, Japo is a wonderful footballer too. Like all of them can prosper from that and can benefit from him being there, which is on top of whatever he's managed to contribute. Even if Harry, I'll tell you, if he scores 10 Premier League goals next season, don't be surprised if you still think it's been a great success. That's kind of a way of describing what I think is his breadth of contribution potentially. He doesn't need to be a 30 goal a season scorer,
No, I don't think that's. Yeah, again, it's not something that I think that this Liverpool side needs necessarily. I think it's just somebody who's able to play in that role, to not attacks don't break down when the ball gets to him. For example, he's able to sort of like support his teammates, create for others, as you mentioned as well. I think that was kind of the areas where Nunez probably struggled to do so in the end. But one question I did have about the player, because there's been a lot of chat about technique and sort of like intelligence, and Yes, he's very tall, and it'd be great to see. From what you said there, that he seems like he's quite intelligent in terms of how he uses
Yeah.
his height. His speed is something that kind of interested me because when I watched some of those compilations, as you do, I was kind of struck by he did seem quite quick to me in terms of sort of like his speed from a standing start, but I don't know if that's just me looking at
No,
individual kind of highlights or
extremely.
he's extremely quick. Okay.
Yeah, so I would have to look this up properly, so please don't shout at me if I get this wrong. But I think last season, the Bundesliga's official app has a kind of has a tool with which you can measure player speeds, highest speed reached during a game, which was
Right.
kind of the birth of the Mickey van der Ven legend before he joined Tottenham. But Ekitike last season was in the top 10 quickest players,
Mm.
or reached one of the top 10 highest speeds, is probably the more
Wow.
accurate way of saying it. He can move. And again, I mean, like, I don't think it depends how he's used at Liverpool, because I think his role will be a little bit more static and a little less counter-attacky. So you
Mm.
might not see that, but in terms of being a threat beyond the back line, yeah. And also as an isolated fullback, you do not want to be facing him down the touchline, because he can beat you off either side, either foot. He can beat you for skill, for technique, and obviously for speed. So, yeah, the big threat there. Whether that becomes less of a part of his game now, I don't know, but it's there. Should it be useful?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I was reading a piece today. Again, I think it was in the Athletic actually by Cy Hughes around well, asking could Ekitike be a number nine Liverpool have lacked since Fernando Torres, and Fernando Torres is a very particular kind of number nine, and this diminished as he got older. But one of the things obviously was his acceleration, and I was just thinking in my head like quite simplistically, oh, Florian Wirtz through ball, Ekitike like speed
Yeah, I
runs
think
away
there's,
from the player.
but look
Yeah,
how much speed there is in that team now. Like, added Frimpong, it's one of the quickest fullbacks I've ever seen. Kirkes can
Kirkes,
shift, right? Salah can still move. Ekitike, Diaz is no slouch, right? There's so much pace.
Soberslime is quick. Yeah,
Szoboszlai, absolutely, and so, like, I would be amazed if his speed is not part of the equation. Into, I know this is a data signing, and we're dealing with more than just goals, assists, and speed, but I'm sure that was a factor too, and another big plus point there.
Okay, and I think just as a sort of the last question I had really uh, for you on the player was really just around what do you think is one thing that is probably what do you think will be the biggest surprise when it comes to Hugo Ekitike for not just Liverpool fans but just fans in general as of next season in the Premier League? I'm not asking you to say, "Oh, he's going to do this or do that," but if there's an aspect to his game that you think people will be, "Oh, I didn't know he had that to
Yeah,
his game."
it will be how many chances he creates, I
Okay.
think. So, and I don't want this to be taken too literally, but to me, he reminds me of a young Dimitar Berbatov in
Hmm.
terms of, not in the languidness, not that's not a literal comparison. I just mean in terms of how he sees what's happening around him. So when Berbatov was at Spurs and Leverkusen before that, he had a really good mind for players running beyond him into the penalty box, and how quickly he was able to see that and to see the opportunity. And I think pretty quickly there are going to be a couple of, there's going to be that, you know, that moment on Match of the Day where someone said, "Oh, I've done this little cut. Look at this angle that he managed to find, and look at this chance he created." And whether it be through his dribbling ability, his passing ability, or just his speed and the kind of the fractures he creates in the defensive system, that's going to be the thing. I think if everything goes well, I think that's, because his goals, his skill, sure, but it's his mind. He's a very, very smart footballer, and no doubt we're both kind of data nerdery, right? So, it doesn't take too much to go onto FBref and back that one up. Unfortunately, not quite as detailed as it used to be, the good old days. But I'm sure, with the kind of the data and the analysis tools that Liverpool use, which are, far more comprehensive than anything I'm sure I can imagine, they'll know exactly what they're getting. And I think that'll be pretty obvious pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think we're talking on a day where the player's not yet been formally announced, but I think you mentioned earlier on that sort of the news around Arsenal and Gyökeres and sort of that
Yeah.
that deal progressing as well. And actually thinking about it now, I mean, lot has been made of the money that Liverpool have spent this summer. Lots has also been made, thankfully, of like how they've been able to do it, and how it's like kind of sort of maybe being modest in other windows has allowed them to be as aggressive as they have been so far. But all the players you look at, I think, as you mentioned, that kind of fit the bill of what you'd expect Liverpool to be targeting in terms of profiles of players. And when you think of the number nines, not necessarily number nines, but forwards who are out there, um, he does make the most sense. It does like the Liverpool bill. It does. Yes, it's Isak. Maybe if Isak was a couple of years younger, maybe that you'd expect like Liverpool to target him then, rather than buy him off a Premier League club for an exorbitant fee. Gyökeres as well, his age, the lack of kind of testing in a top. So it's disrespectful to the Portuguese league, but like the the lack of real testing in the fire of seeing how he'll react. I think when you view it in that light, that this Ekitike transfer does make a bit more sense. That he fits the Liverpool profile. Even like forget the fee, that the actual kind of style of the player, his attributes, it does seem to fit quite nicely.
The fee is the distraction. Like the fees are. I obviously, I spend time on social media. I see fans arguing amongst themselves about, this means this about your football team, and you spent that. I don't really care. Like I think I'm just more interested. I'm not passing judgment. I'm just more interested in what the player does now, and the price is the price. And there are a lot of clubs willing to pay it. Ultimately, Liverpool one of them, and they were the club that Ekitike wanted to go to. So that's just that, right? So, and there weren't many clubs put off by the price. So that should tell you something about it. Chelsea didn't follow up on their interest. They went down the João Pedro route. Fine. Manchester United had a late go. Newcastle obviously had a pretty substantial go. Liverpool ended up going to the valuation that Eintracht Frankfurt wanted. But, given the opportunity and given the encouragement by the player, others would have done so too. So, it's the price doesn't worry me.
I suppose the final. I said I already asked you the final question, and this is asking you to predict the future, really. But we spoke a little bit around. This is a pretty formidable squad that Liverpool are assembling here, and it's something that's surreal for me to think of as well, because I think in my history of being like a Liverpool fan, maybe one or two high profile signings, but to see this many come in and from a position of strength is something that I don't think Liverpool have done in their modern history, certainly.
No.
And I just wonder what your view on it is so far. How you kind of see it shaping up. I'm not going to ask you to predict who's going to leave, who's going to come in next, because I think there's still rumors out there. I think there will still be business. I think it's quite clear. Maybe quite a few departures as well. But just your wrap up thoughts on the business Liverpool are doing, really.
I'm jealous of it. I'll be perfectly honest. I think if the four major transfers are all excellent. I like all of those players for different reasons. I think to add that on top of what was already a Premier League winning team is a tremendous luxury. And I know the club have spent a lot of money, but to my mind, they spent a lot of money well. Anything I'll say, and it's a hard thing to talk about, but what those players have gone through this summer, I can't relate to that. Like I've experienced death, to those close to me, and I know what that did to me. But this is such an awful situation, and mercifully such a rare one, that I don't know. I feel unable to predict. I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. I suppose it's sort of, and also I don't think we should be kind of like, trying to ascribe kind of an influence to the terrible accident, but it's more about how are all those people doing, right? Because ultimately that is a football team, isn't it? Like yes, it's this big massive abilities and attributes, but it's also morale and happiness and brotherhood and all those things that go into it. And I just can't imagine what it would be like for some of those players to find out that their teammate is no longer there. I just think that must be absolutely terrible. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I love all the players that have come in. I think there are some great characters, some great footballers, some great people, all of that. I don't know much about Kirkus, but the others, yes. But we'll see. I think in a kind of, if you were assembling a football team to play on FIFA, brilliant.
Yeah,
But you know, I hope it goes well, because I think, yeah, I hope it goes well. I mean, all of those players are now under a bit of pressure, but I hope they will deliver. And I also, you know, you know, they're all young guys as well. So you want the best for them. You want them not to kind of buckle under the expectation that will come with it. And there'll be a lot of people that want, you know, Wirtz to fail, Ekitike to fail, because it will make some point about their own club. I'm sure that's the nature of modern football, tribalism. But you know, I think everything that could be done has been done. That's the best way. I think that's the most succinct analysis I can come up with.
no, I'd agree, and I think I mean, I've felt kind of strange about, as I imagine that everybody associated with the club does, about moving on to thinking about other things. I think obviously after the passing of Jota, and it's you think, oh, you get a new striker, and it's like it does.
It's horrible. Even when you're reporting on it, like you're thinking about, you're so used as a reporter to thinking about needs and what a team needs and what it doesn't have. And I remember writing some of the passages during our reporting, and you just think, oh, what a terrible thing this is, because football is such a trivial nonsense compared to, you know, to life, and yet you have to almost it's just thank goodness it's so rough, you know.
Yeah, and it's a strange thing as well, because I think I said the same thing, I think, to some friends a while ago, that it wouldn't surprise me if, like, Liverpool had a really strange 5 or 6 opening games to the season, and I think it's I have no expectations. I think when you lose someone like that and you're a tight knit group, you have no idea how it's going to affect you. I thought the manager spoke well actually about, you know, what you need to cry, because we need to, like, laugh, etc.
Team needs love. Team needs love.
Yeah.
Team needs support, and I dare say that goes for a lot of people, because there'll be fans who struggle with it, even people that have, you know, no relationship with Diogo Jota or his brother, and it's going to be very weird. And, no one should underestimate just how difficult a thing that must be.
No, and I think just one aspect to it that I was thinking about, because thinking about going to the Community Shield or going to those sort of games that are coming up, and I was just thinking, you rarely are in a situation in life where you lose somebody, and I've lost people who I've worked with and all sorts, but like, I didn't come into the office to hear someone singing their song, you know, like it's the frequency with which that will undoubtedly happen next season, and I have no idea how that will make people feel, really. So it's I think that's another component of it that's slightly strange to me, in that it's obviously a tribute, it's obviously a show of affection.
Of course.
I can also imagine it being deeply upsetting for people to hear that, right? But it's going to happen. So it's just like thinking about how the club reacts to it, really. So
I always think of I forget who they were playing. I think it might have been against Swansea, but I remember watching Shay Given line up to play for Newcastle the day after, or the afternoon after which the news about Gary Speed broke.
Yeah.
And like, Hollywood always teaches you that in that situation you gain this tremendous power, and, you know, do it for him, and you know, but then Shay Given was just devastated, and he was just sobbing in the center circle before the game started. And I think grief is such a complex thing, and it's so hard to deal with, and it goes on for so long, that it's got to be extraordinarily difficult. So, you know, I mean, I think just all the best, really, to everybody involved, and I hope everybody kind of gets through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's only right that this come up in the discussion about, you know, a new player joining Liverpool, that it's going to linger throughout the entire season. But and yeah, a tiny thing, but just very happy to see that on the Liverpool site, that he's there as a forever member of the squad. It's just a tiny thing that I thought was particularly nice. I'm sure there'll be plenty of other things that I see throughout the season that will knock me off. But thanks as always for coming on, Seb. I think hope you come on a few more times if there's some more
We haven't
some
got
more
any more players to sell you.
some more exciting talent from
You've
the
exhausted
Bundesliga.
the Bundesliga's talent pool, so give it a year and then maybe, but not for a
Yeah.
while.
No, I think we probably are down, but well, from the Bundesliga anyway. But let's see. But yeah, always a pleasure to sort of learn a bit more about a player who I'm going to be learning a lot more about over the coming months and years. So yeah, thanks so much for all your insight.
You're most welcome.